Because you're a Christian.
You say that. I haven't claimed that.
Oh, what is this? Is this Christians versus atheists?
I don't know.
You don't know where you are right now.
Don't be a smartass.
Well,
and I mean
either you're a
'cause
Christian
I won't
or you're
talk
not.
to you if you're a smartass.
Oh, either you're a Christian or you're not. Which one is it?
I could be either of them, but I don't have to tell you.
I was invited to talk to a Christian. Am I not talking to a Christian?
No, you were invited to.
I think everyone should look at the title of the YouTube channel. You're probably in the wrong YouTube video.
You're really quite something, you are.
Aren't I? But you're really quite nothing, right? You're not a Christian.
Okay, I'm done with him.
Hello and welcome to Unreligiously. My name is Lauren, and today we are going to be deep diving on someone that has been big in the news media for a long time, Dr. Jordan Peterson. You might have heard him from his book that was about the crabs and the lobsters, or from one of his many media appearances, time rubbing shoulders with Andrew Tate and that whole manosphere, and even more. Dr. Jordan Peterson just went on Jubilee to advocate on behalf of Christians in a video that was originally titled One Christian versus X amount of atheists. Later on, Jubilee changed the title to say Jordan Peterson against atheists, but he went in as a Christian. This really showcases a point that I've been trying to figure out how to make for a long time about pop culture and how certain people use Christianity to gain a following and manipulate the masses. Jordan Peterson is a really strong example of this because he uses so much symbolic language, he references the Bible, and he acts as if he stands on Christian principles, but when pushed at all, he won't claim it and he won't stand on it. This is something that we see more and more frequently, both in politics and in the American marketplace. People are trying to sell your faith back to you and convince you that you need it to be whole. In the past, he's really targeted the most mainstream form of American Christianity, which is the evangelical Christian church. But in recent years or months, Peterson has come out saying that he's exploring Catholicism and really appreciates the liturgy, which is really ironic to me given that young people are making a move over to Catholicism because they appreciate the liturgy and the rules and the clear standards that don't change. Does Peterson really suddenly have a developed interest in Catholicism, or is he just continuing to ride the Christian wave to try to convince you guys that he has a better take, a more psychologically informed take, a take that would be better for your mental health and is better thought through, someone who is not only close to God, but understands the human psyche to a T? As someone that loves a lot of Christians, I'm genuinely shocked that more people aren't upset by this and disturbed by the blatant nature of what he's doing. This is all with him not overtly identifying as a Christian himself. So let's jump into it. As always, I'm not trying to send any hate to Dr. Jordan B. Peterson, and all of this is alleged. It's just my opinions as a person who's been watching this go down for a long time. As we go through this, we will watch clips from Jubilee because he does answer a lot of these questions directly, but we will also pull clips from Peterson elsewhere. And I want to have you keep in mind that this is supposed to be pointing out what a lot of creators and influencers are doing. You could say this about Andrew Tate too. He's co-opted religion in many ways to try to appeal to a broader audience and gain trust. This isn't something that is unique to Peterson. He's just someone that is a really blatant example of it.
So do you believe in the all-knowing, all-powerful, all-good notion of God?
What do you mean by believe?
Do you think it to be true?
That's the circular definition. What do you mean when you say you believe?
How is that circular?
Because you added no content to the answer by substituting the word true and believe.
I said you think it to be true.
All right. So if you believe something, you stake your life on it.
What do you mean by that?
You live for it and you die for it. That's what I mean by that.
He uses a lot of language that's co-opted from Christianity, but when it comes down to it, he's really not saying the values of Christianity. And I think even more than that, his mood, his attitude right out of the gate is so hostile. I'm not here to guess whether or not people are Christians or not, or whether or not they truly believe in God or not. But according to the Bible, you know other believers by their fruit. What is the fruit? It's love, joy, peace, patience, goodness, kindness, gentleness, and self-control. In any of these clips, ask yourself, is Peterson showing love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, gentleness, faithfulness, or self-control? No, none of those. He is on edge, he's angsty, and he comes across as almost being a little psychotic, like somebody that is going through an episode where they believe that they're the king and they can talk down to you and tell you how you must speak to them. It's very bizarre and a weird way to enter a debate, especially if you're trying to be promoting the Christian view, where you would say, I am the least of these. You would go in with an attitude of humility and love, trying to spread this. But Peterson doesn't go in doing that, and that's not important to him. And why is that? I think that it might be because he's not a Christian. Acting like he doesn't know what the definition of the word believe is insane and makes it impossible to debate. Peterson just has these personal definitions that are wildly different than everyone else's. And when you press him on it, he actually blames you and says that it's that you don't know what those words mean. And that's the problem. To say that the definition of believe is to stake your life on it is, there's just nowhere to go with that. And again, what does that have to do with promoting the Christian view or the faith or defending Jesus or Christianity? He had an opportunity here and he threw it away. Christians should be upset that instead of giving this opportunity to an actual Christian who could maybe promote love and settle some of the tensions down in the US right now, they gave it to Peterson.
I just feel like you kind of retreat into this semantic fog.
I'm not retreating at all. I'm advancing, sir. You are retreating.
You understand, surely, that when somebody asks, do you believe in God? Although they're asking, the sort of subject of the belief is a much more grand entity, the word belief itself, they mean something much more mundane.
It's hard to know what people mean. You know, like one of the things I've noticed, for example, is the Christian trolls, when they ask that question, and it's often the Christian trolls who ask that question, what they mean is, are you in my club?
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
And my answer is, I'm not even sure you know what club you're in. There's a trap in the question, which I don't appreciate because I don't like questions that have traps in.
He changes the meanings of different things like belief or worship or religion to make it sound like he is indeed a religious individual. But is that really what Christians would call the definition of Christianity? It doesn't seem like Peterson would know.
What you're trying to do is you're trying to muddy the waters when I ask you, like, do you believe this? Do you think this to be true? So you don't actually have to answer the questions. And plenty of Christians don't like that because they clearly see that you don't really want to be associated with Christianity.
I can imagine that
This video is not here to debunk Peterson's views. The goal of today's video is to go a little bit deeper than that. I want to explore how, as an ex-evangelical, I see Peterson's relationship to Christianity as way more than just intellectual curiosity. I see it as co-opting, as malicious borrowing from the faith to try to appeal to a broader audience without taking on the responsibility of actually living in that religion or that faith or understanding what embodying those teachings would really mean for a person's life. Before we dive in, no, this is not about whether or not Jordan Peterson is a good guy or a bad guy, whether we agree with his viewpoints or we don't agree with them, whether we've read his books about the crabs or lobsters or we haven't read it. None of that matters. What we're doing is focusing on a common problem, which is celebrities and influencers using religion to manipulate the masses. I don't know what Peterson's intentions are, but I think that it will become a little bit clearer. Jordan Peterson loves to talk about God. He loves to talk about Jesus. He talks about sin, suffering, redemption, the cross. He cries when asked if he believes in God. Jordan Peterson quotes the Bible constantly, but when he gets pressed directly about his faith, about his beliefs, about what he would identify as, do you believe in God? He completely sidesteps the question and dodges it. He intellectualizes it, tries to debate the wording that you're using, and ultimately won't answer the question.
Do I believe that Christ is the way and the life and that no one comes to the Father but through him? Sure. But I also know what that means. It means that, imagine that you want to have the Spirit of the Almighty dwell within you, say, in this Old Testament manner. How do you do that? By taking the burden of life on yourself voluntarily. Why? Because that causes the best within you to make itself manifest.
Anybody who's grown up around Christianity likely knows this, that core to the Christian faith is that you have to profess it. Even backing away from answering a question like this would be seen as kind of cowardly by other people in your faith group. But when it comes to Peterson, people act like he's just being really deep. No, he's blatantly not answering the question. He's hiding behind flowery wording that people can't really understand, so they just walk away going, well, he said he technically believes.
Why are you asking me that?
Because you're a Christian.
You say that. I haven't claimed that.
Oh, what is this? Is this Christians versus atheists?
I don't know.
You don't know where you are right now.
Don't be a smartass.
Well,
and I mean
either you're a Christian or you're not.
I won't talk to you if you're a smartass.
Oh, either you're a Christian or you're not. Which one is it?
I could be either of them, but I don't have to tell you.
You can't be silent about your faith, and especially if you have a large platform, which if you were a Christian, you would believe is given to you by God. If God gives you this platform and you are directly asked, do you proclaim belief in Jesus Christ, and you refuse to ever actually answer it, that wouldn't sit right with most believers, because it's part of the faith to proclaim it, to share the good news, to not deny Christ. Peterson doesn't have to actually know all of this or live a Christian life or be a Christian to get the benefits of catering to and manipulating an evangelical audience. He just needs to sound like he does.
What does it mean to accept Christian values precisely, or Christian morality?
It means to aim up as hard as you can, no matter what happens to you.
Okay.
Okay?
So I think that that's a very broad definition of what Christian morality is.
Yeah, but it'll come in handy at some point in your life.
Right. But I think that many different disciplines and theologies.
Well, you asked for
a lot of evangelicals, especially the ones that see faith as both sacred and fragile, that's enough. If you're using the words that they use, the right terminology, if you hit the right points home, and you share the same fears about politics or the future of the world, then you're in. And if you're watching this video right now and you're describing me and I don't like it, none of this is the fault of the people getting manipulated. This is not a take on Christians. This is a take on influencers and the rise of people using religion as a way to influence and manipulate the masses, especially for someone who promotes honesty and acts like moral integrity is of the utmost importance. They sure do twist the rules a lot.
Mona Lisa.
defining God as conscience.
Okay, so that's interesting, but then you're kind of expanding the meaning of
No,
God.
I'm not. That's how it's defined in the Old Testament.
Okay,
in
so-
Elijah and in Jonah.
Sure, so whoever, so some...
It's not whoever.
Okay.
Elijah is one of the
Okay,
major
all right,
Old Testament
all right,
prophets.
all
Right?
right.
He's equal in stature to Moses.
Okay.
Anyone that is in the faith knows that, yeah, these were big prophets, and maybe if you just study Christianity and you're not a Christian, you might think that they're really big deals, but the actual basis of Christianity is not based on what Moses or Jonah say. Those stories are pretty widely accepted as being pretty allegorical with broader messages to take away, not literal sentence-by-sentence descriptions of how they define God. The fact that he is pulling from obscure people in the Bible to come up with his definition and then is acting as if this other person is childish and minimizing Moses and Jonah. Jonah is famous for getting swallowed by a whale and nothing else for a reason.
Right. So it's not arbitrary.
All right, so that is interesting, but it's not relevant to the context with which I am using the term God.
It's directly relevant. Atheists reject God, but they don't understand what they're rejecting. You accept conscience as a guide, and conscience is one of the defining characteristics of God in the Old Testament.
I think you're being intellectually disingenuous.
It's a bait and switch, and it's just him offering the aesthetics of Christianity without the actual meat of it. I don't need to go into a debate to know that most atheists, if not all, believe that people have consciences, but they don't believe in God, and the two are different for them. By Peterson just demanding that that is what God is, and it is not what anybody else understands God to be, he wins the debate by just broadening the definitions of words to meet whatever he wants. How are they supposed to have a conversation about this if he doesn't have base definitions of words like God, belief, or anything else? I'm not a Christian anymore, but I have a lot of respect for Christianity. And Christianity, at its core, is about grace. Christianity is about a God who moves towards the broken, the weak, and the weary, the undeserving. It's about surrender, humility, forgiveness, and it's not at all about control, status, or power. Peterson's moral framework, though, is built around responsibility, hierarchy, and order. Videos with Peterson talking about the Bible get millions of views. They're kind of interesting to watch if you just watch one or two. After you start watching, it's unmistakable that Peterson can't actually finish a thought. He just tries to debate different terminology and gets lost in the weeds of potential meaning.
I feel like you're getting at this idea of polysemy, where we have multiple related meanings for a word. There are many concepts of God, and I'll admit, I find a lot of what you say about that interesting. I'm familiar with it. The idea of this kind of Jungian hierarchical thing, or as a metaphor or a symbol, or the kind of, atheist, materialist, literalist idea of a agentic, omnipotent, omniscient being that intervenes in reality, right? So when I'm saying that I reject the concept of God, I'm aware of these other definitions of God, but I think that when we use words, we tend to only imply one meaning at a time. I reject the concept of God in this very literal way. But
what literal way?
The way that God is this omniscient, omnipotent, agentic, supernatural being that sent his son down and has, caused miracles and all these things like that. The idea of God is
Do you think that there's an underlying unity of things?
Could you explain that question?
Well, scientists, for example, believe that science unifies in a comprehensive theory. Do you, yes, no, or that there are multiple competing truths? Those are the options. Either things unify or there are multiple competing truths.
I know that, for example, like in physics, people are looking for like a theory of everything.
And why do you think they're doing that?
It's interesting, it's helpful.
But they also believe that there's an underlying unity to things.
In a sense, yeah, like the material world and time and space are probably governed by universal laws and principles.
Partly that, yes, yes, but that the same thing might extend to a broader domain that would include imagination and value.
Could you help me connect that to the prompt?
Well, I'm trying to define God, the God that I don't think atheists do a very good job of defining. So Elijah, the prophet Elijah, defined God in the Old Testament as the voice of conscience within.
Okay.
That's a definition.
So you're saying by that definition of God, I see this kind of goes back to where I'm saying initially.
I'm not defining it. Elijah defined it.
Okay, so as Elijah defines God.
It's defined that way in Jonah too.
Okay, so as
Cardinal Newman also defined it that way.
As I'm sure you know many people who've defined it that way, and it's impressive. You're a very knowledgeable person.
I'm not trying to be impressive. I'm just pointing out to you how God is defined in the Old Testament.
I do think there are lots of interesting ways to define God, and that goes back to my kind of opening
Then how
statement.
do we specify what we're arguing about?
I know I keep saying it, but Peterson is just truly incapable of having any sort of base or group understanding of any words. I don't know why people invite him to debate when this is all that he does is play semantics. It's like trying to debate with a toddler. They don't understand what you're saying, so the debate would never get off the ground. If you quoted, "For God so loved the world," he would say, well, what constitutes the world? What constitutes love? what constitutes God. Don't even get me started on the second half of the verse.
I said ah.
Yeah.
I didn't say the. I
know.
said ah.
That is possible, yes.
It's impossible after a few videos to not see that he is continually putting off actually answering the question, instead trying to appear academic by being extremely precise with the terminology that he's using.
You're saying atheists worship things or people or places, whatever. Can you be very clear about your definition of worship again?
Attend to, prioritize, and sacrifice for.
He interprets the Bible not as a divine revelation or really an inerrant text, but as a psychological map. Adam and Eve aren't real people in a real garden. They're symbols of the human psyche. Jesus isn't God incarnate. He's the archetype of ideal behavior.
Jordan, what would you like to eat for dinner?
Well, that depends. What would you classify as dinner?
Jordan, we're not doing this again. What do you want? Do you want like a sandwich? Do you want like a soup, a salad?
That's a complicated question, because then I have to ask myself, what does a sandwich really mean?
To the average person, this might sound deep or really interesting as an interpretation of Christianity, but the reality is it's nobody's interpretation of Christianity.
God says that you can own people as property. He says that you can beat them with a rod too. He commands genocide in Deuteronomy, in Numbers, and in Samuel. I mean, they have a goddamn baby barbecue in Numbers. Like, is all of this in line with Christian ethics?
No.
So then God doesn't fit within Christian ethics.
Well, the biblical library is a continuing story, and everything written in it has to be contextualized by the entire text. There's 65,000 hyperlinks in the biblical text. And you can take pieces of it out of context and criticize them, and that's what you're doing. But that's a mistake, I think. It's an analytic mistake because you're putting the cart before the horse.
I really don't think so. I think that
no,
if we say that something is Christian ethics, then I think that all of the books essential to Christianity would fit with it, especially if it's like the main character. When we're talking about
How do you deal with
God,
the morality of war?
So
how do you think you should deal with the morality of war?
Sure. Because I feel like the morality, like I feel like Christian ethics, like this is kind of, I guess I just think it's like kind of an absurdity to say that God doesn't fit within Christian ethics, but sure, well, we can go on my ethics. That's totally fine.
I don't know what you mean by an absurdity. What game are you playing with that
Well, I just think that it's an absurdity to say that the Christian God doesn't fit within Christian ethics, that like the Christian God isn't like Christian ethical.
I said that the specific statements that you made don't take the context of the stories into account, and so that your analytical approach is faulty.
Sure.
Don't put words in my mouth.
Sure, then let's go through the example. Yeah, so, and I apologize. So let's go through the example. So in 1 Samuel 15:3, God says, go and slaughter the Amalekites, slaughter the men, the women, the children, the infants. What's the justification for that? Is that in line with Christian ethics?
That's a good question. I don't really know what to do with the terrible, blood-soaked, saturated history of the human past. I don't know. And I don't think anybody knows.
Christianity has a gospel and a good news, and it's not built on complete metaphor. In reality, it's a complete rejection of the biblical reality that Christians uphold. As someone that used to be in the church and grew up fundamentalist, this isn't faith, and it's upsetting to see because there is a beauty to faith, and the monetization of faith, the saleability of faith has really caused the public perception of Christianity and religion as a whole to take a massive downturn, and it's caused people to leave the church. I think the worst thing about it is that it creates a lot more confusion. You listen to him and you think that you're learning something, but in the end, it's just a bunch of word soup.
My experience with atheists is twofold. Is that they have a very reductive notion of what constitutes God, let's say in the Judeo-Christian tradition, and they've often been hurt by someone who was religious or by the religious enterprise or perhaps by God himself, so to speak, and that's left them with an animus.
But I think that you have a reductive view of what atheism is. You've defined religion so broadly to include any sort of having aim in life, any sort of cultural archetypes, or having a metaphorical substrate. And atheism to you is a very specific type of like three people in the world that are these Raskolnikov type of They want to get away with a perfect murder. It seems like you have the reductive view of what an atheist is.
Well, let's start with your claim. How do you define the God that you're rejecting?
Jordan Peterson has also become a political symbol almost as much as a spiritual one. And yet he still uses the faith, the Bible, to push his own ideology, his own ideas of what theology is. He quotes scripture in debates about gender and makes terrible claims about these groups of people. He invokes Christ to defend hierarchy and gender roles. Peterson isn't bringing people to Jesus. He's bringing Jesus into the culture war. Jesus never asked to be there in the first place. He doesn't ask people to become Christ-like. He asks them to use Christ to validate their own resentment. That's not ministry, it's marketing. So what happens when you stop watching these videos or you let the Peterson effect wear off and you leave this internet subculture? People that followed him for purpose often end up bitter and more isolated or even radicalized. The myth of the self-made man leaves no room for grief, failure, or any kind of softness. And for Christians, it really just leaves them spiritually disoriented, especially if you're paying attention. They were fed a version of faith that looked strong, but actually wasn't backed by the Bible and couldn't hold them. When life breaks you, and it will, hierarchy will not save you. Clean room is not going to heal you. You can't white knuckle your way to grace and redemption.
Jordan Peterson says, I will not become a Christian because I could not live a consistently ethical life that someone like Jesus would call me to live. Okay, that's good in a way. He's being consistent with the worldview of, yes, live in a way that the Bible commands us, the 10 Commandments, how Jesus calls us to love others. But what Jordan Peterson is totally missing is how the Bible is filled from Genesis through Revelation about grace, God's grace, which is we mess up, sin all the time with our thoughts, our words, our behaviors. So we need God, we need Christ-specific forgiveness. And when we get his forgiveness, then we understand. We are new creations, like Paul talks about. The old is gone, the new has come. So live a life dedicated to Christ and live out that great character. But see, if Peterson would catch grace, he could become a Christian.
And that's why Peterson's version of Christianity ultimately fails. It has no cross, no resurrection, no gospel, just order, fear, and a bunch of rules that are prescriptive and induced by Peterson himself. It's really just a way to shame people dressed up as strength. So is Jordan Peterson a Christian? In my opinion, no. My definition of a Christian is someone who is a Christ follower, a believer in Christ. They are someone who wants to try to become a mini Christ. Peterson doesn't believe in any of that. He doesn't believe in the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. He doesn't believe in a 3-day resurrection. He doesn't believe that Christ died and rose again. And he does not necessarily believe in the end times and the return of Christ coming back. These are the general framework or points that you would have to agree with to be considered a Christian, someone who participates in the Christian faith. Peterson doesn't subscribe to any of that. So by my standards, no, I wouldn't consider him a Christian. And I know he'd lose his ever-loving shit if he heard that, but that's the reality. I think that for someone that wants to draw lines and keep people in their own camps and not pretend to be something that you're not, Peterson is surprisingly angry when he gets called out for not being a Christian.
So you've agreed to debate me. I'll let you know that I have a strange personal definition for every single word, and unless you engage with me using my personal definitions, I'm going to get mad at you. And if you ask me to explain or define any of my definitions, I'm also going to get mad at you. Now let the battle of the minds begin.
But at the end of the day, Peterson doesn't have to be a Christian. I don't care if he's a Christian or not, and I think a lot of Christians wouldn't care if he was or not either.
Jordan Peterson being exposed as a charlatan by 20 atheists on Jubilee is not embarrassing as a Christian pastor because of the atheism of it all. They actually had well-educated arguments and really wanted a well-informed discussion. It's embarrassing because Jordan Peterson is being exposed as just another charlatan trying to use Christianity to gain relevance, to gain content, to gain clicks, to gain authority. But the reality is he is so intellectually insecure that when people actually bring well-educated arguments to him and actually push him to defend the things that he believes, he retreats to this semantic place where he doesn't actually believe anything, which shows how weak and insecure he really is intellectually and goes against everything he says about how masculinity means to be strong and means to stand up for your point. But he is unable to defend or to stand up for any of the positions that he actually believes in. And it's so frustrating to see so many Christian content creators try to gain a voice, try to gain relevance without actually sharing the things that Jesus wanted us to share. Jesus didn't care about gay people. He didn't say one thing about gay people. Jesus doesn't say anything about abortion. Jesus wants us to love the people who are our enemies, and he wants us to care about poor people and immigrants. And if you care more about the former than you do the latter, you are just like Jordan Peterson and do not care about what Christianity actually represents. You only want the power, the authority, the relevance that comes with Christianity. You don't actually want to be a disciple of Christ who calls us to love our neighbor, to let people who stole from you keep it and you can't even ask for it back. I'm so sick of pretending these Christian content creators who just want more views, more clicks, more followers, instead of pointing them to Jesus, who actually just wants us to love one another, to care about one another. And so I'm so glad that these atheists did expose Jordan Peterson for the charlatan he is, because he doesn't believe in anything.
If he would have never brought religion into this whole thing, he could have still been a great author or public speaker. But instead, he's stolen religion and he's become a religious figure to people who, in many cases, should know better. He's created a faith-adjacent ideology that is completely different from Christianity. It's one that looks like it and might sound like it and feels like it, but it's hollowed out, and there's no grace, no love, no compassion, and no soul behind any of it.
Well, someone once asked you whether you thought Jesus was literally resurrected, and you said it would take me 40 hours to answer that question. You don't need to do that if you have a clear-cut answer to that question.
I don't have a clear-cut answer to that question.
And if you don't...
It isn't obvious in the biblical account that Christ was literally resurrected. So it's not simple. This is not simple.
No, but if the question is, do you think he... Well, let's put it probabilistically. I mean, anything's possible. I'll tell you that it's possible that he was physically resurrected. I mean, it's even possible.
But wait a second, I didn't
with respect
say
to quantum
that he
mechanics.
Was.
The point is,
I said it would take me 40 hours to answer the question. I didn't say that he was.
Well, go ahead. How's this for an answer? Almost certainly not.
People seem to think that I'm trying to evade the question. It's like, I'm not evading the question. I'm trying to figure it out. People have been arguing about this for 2,000 years. It's like, it's not simple.
But that's a symptom of the effect of religious dogmatism for 2,000 years.
If you're a Christian and you follow Peterson, what do you think? Is this something that you have noticed when you've watched him before? I would love to hear your guys' thoughts. Do you feel like Peterson is a Christian? And if so, what is your definition of Christianity? Or do you see it more like I do, that he is trying to monetize by manipulating the Christian audience? I think that it is really disgusting, and I think it's really alarming, and that Christians should be offended that he takes on these terms and titles, but then will never actually claim to love God or be a Christian. I know that when I was a Christian, that would have upset me, and I'm surprised that a lot of Christian backlash has been focused at people like Lil Nas X rather than people like Peterson who are pretending to love God. At least in cases like Lil Nas X, they're not trying to pretend to be a Christian, they're just making art and doing what they do. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. I would love to hear about it. And let me know if there's anyone else like this that you'd like me to look into. Like I said in another video, I have a literal physical list that I write down all of your guys' suggestions down on. So if you guys want to make a suggestion, I definitely do really look into them and take it into account. I really appreciate all of your engagement lately, all of the likes, comments, and shares. You guys have been so incredible and so supportive and amazing, and I really appreciate it. And yeah, I don't know, keep it up. Keep up the comments, keep up the liking, sharing. Please double check to make sure that you're followed, and if you're not, hit the follow button. And yeah, I hope you guys have an awesome week. I will see you next week.
I had a BC era, a before Christ era. I did, and that's one thing I wanted to break down today was my testimony. You know, years ago, before I was serving Daddy God, I used to shop at Target. I did. I know that's a shocker, but I used to shop at Target almost every weekday. And one week I was just drawn to the book section for some reason, and I saw a book on the shelf called The Battlefield of the Mind by Joyce Meyer. And as soon as I saw it, I don't know why, but I felt like I just had to read it. And now I know that that was Daddy God working on my heart, because I picked that book up and I began to read. And as I read that Joyce Meyer book, I knew that I was not living for God the way I should be. And, you know, I went home right away and I canceled our Netflix subscription and I canceled our Disney Plus. And I told my kids they're not allowed to play violent video games like Fortnite anymore. And I went through that house and I closed every demonic portal that I could. I put up a hedge of protection around the house in prayer. Come on now. And ever since then, we've been serving Daddy God. Now, why Joyce Meyer selling a book at Target? I don't know. That may be sin. She might want to work that out with the Lord with some prayer and repentance. I'm not sure. But Daddy God began to do a work in our lives. And you know, our lives got more difficult after that. Yeah, no, it actually got harder. See, because people think that serving God is easy and serving the world is hard. It's actually the other way around. See, because as soon as you start serving Daddy God, the devil comes out like a roaring lion with his big fangs and his scary teeth, and he decides he's going to eat you. And so you got to be prayed up for that. And that's why I tell people that if you're going to really serve God, you've got to be ready for war. You got to be ready for warfare. And so, you know, that's why my kids don't have Disney Plus.